The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to day 2 of our ALM QC Expert Week. This is the first time we're doing an Expert Week. Yesterday we held 3 sessions, and today we're also doing 3 sessions. And the first one is the HPALM Business Views, which is going to be delivered by Offer Spiegel, who is a functional architect for HPALM. During the session, you can look at the questions area to submit your questions, and Offer will then address your questions. Or at the end of the presentation or during the day, you can go into our forums, and Offer will show a slide on that at the end, and I'll touch a little bit on that at the end where you could submit your questions. This session is being recorded, and we will be placing that in the private forum. Today our sessions are all in the private forum, which is only available to our customers and our partners that have access to the forums. So within that, you can always submit your questions. You don't have to wait for an expert day or expert week to submit questions there. We have HP support engineers there ready to answer your questions. So, but today it's about HPALM Business Views, and I'm going to pass it off to Offer. So Offer, you're up.
Thank you, Bill. And hello, everyone. And I'm really glad that you took the time to join this session today. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to discuss the concept of business views with you and to show you what it's all about. And in a way, the idea of business views came about after understanding, and this is something which is quite natural when we come to deal with information systems that needs to eventually provide insights into the data that we collect. That eventually reports are much like a cup of coffee for every person, liking his own coffee done in his or her way with their own likings. So the same goes to reporting. Every stakeholder in a company eventually likes to see the particular information relating to their role, and to be displayed and visualized in a particular manner, to have that data visualized in the way that that stakeholder wants to see it. And business views, in a way, is another step in that direction, into assisting administrators and users to reach the design of reports in an easy fashion to fit their needs and liking when it comes to reporting. So today's agenda in this session is all about business views. First, understand what are these, what are business views, what they're all about, where do business views come from, what are they good for, and to top all that with the WIFM factor, the what's in it for me factor, to see what is the eventual value that business views provide us by utilizing them. So what are business views? So essentially, business views are a logical layer that's placed over the database. If up until the introduction of business views, every interaction and every report being designed, whether it is charts or reports, and especially the Excel reports that we had, required the interaction with a physical database. And when it came to the Excel reports, for example, in the old fashion, we really needed to know the intricacies of the physical database structure, which essentially is a technical definition of how the data is being stored, and is not fashioned usually to be customer-facing or end-user facing, and sometimes can be even a bit enigmatic as to how names being defined there and so on, to understand the relationship. So that's really creates quite a challenge. Many times you need to be quite familiar with the way that database is being constructed and to follow upon changes of the database with every new major version. So today, with the introduction of business views, in a way, creating a logical layer on top of the physical database, and by that, in a way, provide some sort of abstraction to the complexity of the database, and to simplify the approach and the utilization of that database or the database element. The business views, in a way, are a definition of a SQL query based on domain query language, which is a proprietary definition of or wrapping of the SQL statement, where we, instead of using the database terms, we in a way use a domain model terms. So we call entities as they are in a simple fashion, not in an encrypted way. So it makes the one that defines the business use, it makes all the terms be much more understandable and easy to find and easy to use. The domain query language allows to extend the syntax by adding supporting system variables and functions, system variables such as column me that we can put in the where clause that allows us to make the view already defined to address the current user. The same way goes with current domain and project. Another benefit of utilizing this logical layer, not directly connecting to the database, is that it abides to all the security enforcement that we put around the data access of a project. For example, if you're using data hiding, that a group of users are permitted to see only a fraction of the data, so that data hiding definitions will take place when accessing the database using business use. And also we have the ability to have virtual fields supported and created and defined as part of the business use. Another important aspect is by being a logical layer that you define, and in such a way the views that we define, the results that you want to define, are agnostic to the underlying database. So today you can create your business use over Microsoft SQL Server, and tomorrow you can switch for any reason to Oracle. You do not need to do any change to the business use that you define, because we take care of translating that business use that you define to the underlying database at a given time. So that is an extra value that you get from utilizing business use. And I think it allows us quite easily to create views that go outside the boundaries of a single entity. So if usually up until now we could easily approach a single entity and to create some kind of a cross-entity report, it was quite a challenge. And with business use, we get it to be done much easier than we had in previous versions. And as mentioned, when it comes to virtual fields, calculated fields, we can enhance the views to include those fields, and by that reduce the effort of the end user trying to create a report based on such calculated fields. So where are these views coming from? So essentially, business views are parts of a project. Every project has its own set of business views that you define it per project. Every project that you create, every new project that you create or migrate to the new version supporting business views, there are about 40 out-of-the-box business views that are created automatically as part of the project. That you can continue to add your own business views or modify the existing views that are part of the new project as the out-of-the-box views for you to manage. So you can mold them and shape them to fit your specific needs, and of course, again, create your own. The ones that create business views is something that normally is not given to any user in the system. This is something that we want to limit to a particular group of users. So of course, the administrator has that privilege, and as you can see here, we have a new permission called Manage Business Views that you can, in a way, create an additional group that can be of project managers or QA managers or any group that you like, that you can, in a way, turn on the Manage Business Views permission, and by that delegate the ability to define business views to other stakeholders in the organization. By that, reduce the overload that sometimes administrators deal with when it comes to requests relating to reports. So this is, again, something that any user potentially can do that, given that user has the permission to go in and create a managed business view. And we saw in the screen before, the business views are defined and managed as part of the project customization. So it is granted to those that we want to permit to go into the project customization area. And essentially the flow of creating a business use is quite simple. We go into the business use editor in the customization screen to create them, to validate them. Once they are created, and the more complex the business view is, the more time it takes to complete it. Once we see that it is done, we can then publish it, and by publishing it, when we make it then available for the end users of that project to see it and consume it by creating graphs and Excel reports based on that business view. So let's see it in action. I will now switch to ALM, and just as a side note, whenever I mention ALM, I refer both to the ALM edition and the QC Enterprise edition. The business views and most of the capabilities that you will see here in this session apply to both editions, except for one particular difference between them that I will mention when we get there. So I will be mentioning ALM most of the time, but I'm referring to both editions. So here we are in ALM. This is ALM 12. If we didn't get to see ALM 12 yet, so we also had some embellishment of the user interface with some new look and feel, but the functionality remains just the same as before. No dramatic changes there. So here I'm in the defect, so let's switch to the customization. I'm turning to the customization. I'm here logged in as an administrator. And in the customization, we have the business views entry here that opens up in a way the entire editor to manage and create and modify the business views. So here we see the list of business views that I mentioned, apart for one that I've created myself manually that I will show it in a minute. All the rest are the out-of-the-box business views. This is the demo project that I'm working on, and this is available for that project and for any other project that you will be creating in the versions of ALM that support business views. So this is part of the content of the project. And so I will now go briefly around the areas for us to understand which pane deals with what, as this is quite a busy screen. And so here, as we mentioned already, this is the list of the views that are available in this project that we can modify, add to, remove even, and so on. And the rest of the screen allows us to edit, to see and edit, modify that view. So I will expand the screen by clicking here to have more real estate and to see what we're doing. So in this area, in a way, these three screens help us to define the eventual query that we want to do. The select statement, and we have the relationship diagram here that allows us to define what are the fields to be selected from which table and what links needs to take place between the two tables or the whatever number of tables that we will have. And we have here the list of the participating fields, whether they are output or not. If they are aliases, criteria that are part of the where clause can be defined here. And both definitions are reflected in the query builder here that you can also manually type in its definition and to establish the view that you want to create. On the right-hand side, you see the list of all entities that have been modeled to fit the domain query terminology that we allow access to directly from here. So what I will do now, I will just create a new view. We can create a blank one or duplicate an existing view to further modify it as a copy of it with some additions. So I will create a new view. I'll call it my defect. So we get to see a blank view now. So what I will do now, I will first add a defect entity. Okay, so it is displayed here. Initially, the default is select everything from the defect entity table. So I can select, but I don't want everything. I want to have the defect ID to be part of it. I want to have the detected in release. Part of that I want to have in this view. I want to also have the priority to be part of the view. The same goes for severity, status, summary, and I think there may be also detected by. Okay, so this is a very basic view that I've created, and now I can, before I start the work, I need to make sure that the view that I created is valid, so I have the validate view option here. I click on it, so it runs the validation and tells me if it is faulty or good, and the validation succeeds. And then I can ask to preview, so usually just add this screen here that we need to expand. We see the preview of it here below. So we see all that information with the field that I wanted to be part of it. Now I see that the detected in release essentially provides us the ID of the release. Okay, we see some that have the ID, some that don't have anything, shown by null value. So what I want to do now is to create a relationship and also to resolve the release name from the ID. So what I need to do is, let me collapse it a bit. I will ask for the release entity. Okay. And what I need to do is, instead of having the detected in release as an output, I will simply drag it to match the release ID of the release entity. Okay. And as an output, I will have the name of that release. Okay. And I can now validate it again. Good. And then we see the preview. That's it. Okay. And now the release name being resolved. But we can also see that in a way now in the output, we don't see all those that have the null indication. Because what we've done here is an inner join. The default link is an inner join type of link. So we can change it here to be a left join, but I can also double click on the connection here and ask it to select all records from the left side, from the defect list. And that changes the link to be a left join to the release entity. So now if we preview it again, we'll see that we have both those that carry an ID and then it is resolved, and those that don't have any ID. And again, we can further enhance it by criteria. Let's say I want to see all those defects that are of very high or of urgent severity. Okay, so that will also be part of the where clause. Again, I can type it in manually, but I can do it on this screen. And of course, add more entities to create additional relationships to link it to all the their linked entities like the other tests, other defects, requirements, and so on. And once I'm done, and again the view is valid and the output is works exactly as I want, then I can proceed to publish it. Okay, so initially it is not published. I will minimize the screen. We see that also this icon of it with the red line indicates that this view is not published yet. By being not published, it means that from the end user perspective that we will see in a minute, we will not be able to see it. End users are not cannot use that view yet. Only when I ask to publish it, then and I will save that customization, then it will be available for end users to consume it. We can, if you want, we can ask to see how this SQL query statement translates into the underlying database in a genuine SQL statement. We can copy it and paste it to make other validations around that in terms of performance if you want. And that is the main way that we will go about creating our views. And we can also share views between projects and also between even companies, projects in different companies, by exporting the views and importing those views from one project to another. And just to show you the ones that we talk about calculated fields, so of course, like any select statement, I can, for example, this one that we'll also work with in a minute, I see that you can see that I created a calculated field to check what is the turnaround time from a defect to go from the creation time to the closing date. So we have a date difference calculation divided by 7 as a turnaround time in weeks, and we'll use that in a minute. And of course, we can create any aggregation and calculation that we would normally do in SQL Select queries. So we'll return back. Okay, so this is the way. This is where essentially business use come from. Turn back to the slide. So the next questions that I place is, what are they good for? So currently, we can utilize business views in graph reports that we can create in ALM, and also for creating Excel reports. We have means to create these two types of reports to be based on business use. And of course, business use is recently introduced, and we are now considering to expand it to other reporting means, but for now, these are the ways that we can consume business use. And the idea is that once we can create business use, we can see that also when we consume it in Excel, the great value is that essentially we get to create and design a report that fits exactly what we want and what we need. So again, it's like going into a candy shop that you could create any type of business use to fit the specific needs and to customize the graph or report exactly the way you want to see it. So let's see that in action as well. I will switch back to ALM. So, and here I will switch to the dashboard, to the analysis view. Okay, and I will ask to create a new report item. So, as you can see, we have the new business view graph option, also the old new graph, and the new business view Excel report. For those of you who are very familiar with this screen in previous version, you will notice that there are a few items here that are not available now that we've introduced business views. We also introduced project reports in LM 11 to replace also the standard reports. So in a way, the new to create an Excel report in the old way, not based on business view, and also to create standard reports, these options are not available by default from this new reports pull-down menu. This is the default behavior, but don't need to be worried if you still need to use that old style of reports. And there is a side parameter that you can turn on to have them displayed. The idea is, our intention is for customers to be more familiar with the new ways of reporting and to start and consume and create those reports using the new means, whether it is the business use Excel report and the project report. And of course, in any way, when you migrate to the new version, having business use, all those reports that you've created before, like the old Excel reports and the old standard reports, they will still be available here, that you will still be able to execute them, and to create new ones, such as those, you'll need to utilize the site parameter. So here what I will do, I'll just create a new business view graph. I'll give it a name, defect turnaround. Okay, so a graph is immediately created with a default business view, so I can select the ones that I want, the defect turnaround view that is tailor-made, the specific need to see the graph of defects according to the turnaround calculation, so I don't need to understand how I should calculate that myself. This is done ready-made by the business view. So of course the x-axis I will ask to see it by the turnaround time to have it counted, and I can move to see the view of it. So here we see the distribution of the defects being closed according to the weeks it took, the number of weeks it took to close them. And of course we can add grouping to it, for example, to group it by severity. Okay, so we can now see it sliced also by severity, and make the whatever action items that come out of such a report can now be taken. So this is how we work and consume business use one way, by using and creating business use graphs. Another way, and that is even the more sophisticated way, in a way, much simpler way to create reports is of Excel reports, utilizing a new Excel add-in based on business use, what we call business view Excel add-in. We can create a new one directly here, the new business view Excel report. But the beauty of it is that it can create entirely directly from Excel without even needing to go into and opening up the ALM client. You need to be permitted to have a user, permitted user to the project to utilize it, but you don't need to work from ALM to create a report. So even a manager that is very much knowledgeable about Excel can work directly with Excel without needing to go into ALM even. The add-in needs to be installed once. You can click here to install it. It takes it a second and less to install. There's also an independent file MSI that you can utilize to install the add-in. And once you open up the Excel, you have that add-in of the ribbon here, the HPALM add-in. So again, what I will do now to see how we also can consume business views from Excel, I will do it directly and entirely from Excel. I open up Excel, go to this part of the ribbon, and ask to log in. So I put up the server URL and my username and password, and I ask to authenticate. And once I'm authenticated, I get to choose the domain and project the same way I would log into ALM. And I ask to log in. Okay, and once I'm logged in, I can now start and create my report. So first I need to define what is the business view that I want to consume and work with. So I can go to the add option. So I get the same list that we saw in the graph report. All the published business views that I have available to me. Okay, so let's say choose defects, for example. Click OK. And the defects are now being poured and injected directly into my worksheet. Okay, so I see all these views, quite a big view with a lot of columns. So I can, of course, work on creating and fashioning it exactly, even though the business view itself can be fashioned to select the relevant field with the relevant calculation and aggregation. I can even further reduce that view to show only the elements that I want to work with. So I can, let's say, deselect everything and now ask to see only defect ID, summary, priority, severity, status, assigned to, and detected by. Okay, and back to the HPALM, I can ask to refresh it. Okay, so now we'll see the view being refreshed. Here what we have the auto refresh option that I can turn on. However, we need to remember that every modification done to the view will result in a new request to the server with the new definition. If I turn the auto refresh on, okay, then it usually limits the rows to be of up to 30, just the top 30 to be fetched, because we don't want to create too much traffic to the server. So everything that I will, any chain modification that we'll do here, for example, I will ask to filter only those that are of urgent severity. So I'll go to the severity and ask to have only those that are urgent. Okay, so it is automatically refreshed and being fetched again. So we need to remember that when we design a report and we're just starting, so it's better to turn the auto refresh option off, because we don't want to just make too many redundant hits on the server, and to reduce that load as much as we can, to be friendly to all others that are working against that server, not to make any effect on their performance. So I can turn it on. Now I can, for example, clear that filter. Okay, so now it is not refreshed automatically. I can now ask to have the sorting to be done at the source. You can do it directly here, to sort by the column sorting, but you can also have it from the source being sorted. So I can now refresh it back, and I can remove that limit. Okay, so this just shows the top 30 rows. I can refresh now and see all the rest. So in a way now I have that data. Now I can do whatever I want to do in an Excel way. Unlike the old Excel reports that I needed not only to create my own select statement against the physical database, as I mentioned before, which was quite complex of itself. Then I would also need to create a VB script in a way to make all the manipulation in Excel to create the charts or pivot tables and highlights and marking by creating some kind of macros definition, which also was something that was not available in terms of knowledge to most users. Not so many users are equipped with the knowledge to create such sophisticated scripts. So the idea is that I can easily place the text without writing any SQL statement directly in Excel, and then go and do my Excel work. So if I want to have a pivot chart around that, so I can have a pivot chart even with a table. It selects that predefined table automatically, have it in a new worksheet. So now I can define that I want to see it to be according to the assigned to, by status, and there to be sliced by priority, and to count. Okay, so we have that visualization being displayed here. Okay, so we see it as sophisticated as we need. And you can see that this data is, now that I'm connected, can be refreshed automatically, and when we refresh the data of the table, all tables and charts that derive from it are automatically refreshed as well. For example, if we see here that, let's say, James has 12, I would say that it has one fixed defect. So we can go back to ALM, go to the defects. I have to see all those of James. Okay, that are fixed. That is fixed. I believe it's this one. Okay, so we can now change it to be closed, or let's change it to be closed. Okay, and now go back to Excel and ask to refresh everything. We see now that the fixed line actually disappeared. Okay, and we have one more for the closed. What's 5, now it's 6, and the fixed line disappeared, and all the charts reflect it automatically. Okay, so again, without myself going as a report user to ALM, I define my report. It can be quite even more sophisticated. You can even create a quite dynamic traceability matrix of coverage, for example. I can ask now to add and see, let's say, all the tests and their linked requirements. Again, a business view that already joins and create that cross-entity capability of providing me a list of all the tests and their linked requirements. So I can add that. Okay, so all that information is being brought in. So I can now go and insert a pivot table and create my own traceability or coverage matrix. I can have the requirement placed here, and to have the test name placed here, and also to count it. Okay, so here we see actually the coverage. We see that the approved credit is covered by approved credit test, and so on. We can even, and now of course, make such a matrix that I can even utilize slicers, for example, to see it by designer and status, for example. Okay, so now I can ask to see what is the coverage of ADAX for all the tests that are ready. So I can see an exact view of what's happening. And of course, I can create any other pivots and slices as I want. And again, whenever there will be modification to the data, I can go here and ask that data be refreshed, and without make any adjustment, just log in and refresh with all the highlights and the coloring and the legends that I will create. All will stick, and I will have that being refreshed anew and to see all that live data available. A few more notes about the work with the add-in. So if we go back to the customization, to the configuration pane here, so we saw the fields, filter, and sorting tabs, and that we can define it to easily select what we want to see. But for those advanced users, they can actually go and edit the query themselves directly. Okay, so I can click the Edit Query button, and what I will get actually is a similar editor to what we saw in the customization. So now I, as an end user, can further embellish and further enhance with even more links and relationships and criteria and aggregation on top of the business view that was defined. Of course, this is something that is available for the end user, not an administrator or one with administrator privileges to manage the business views. So what I see here as the resources are not the entities, but all other business views are available to me. Okay, because if there is an entity that the administrator or the one that manages the business views did not want me to see, so did not wrap it as a business view, so it won't be available to me. And any modification that I will do here will remain locally as part of this Excel worksheet. It will not be propagated back to the customization. It is a local definition that I can make. And of course, this ability to open up and edit the query, we have also a permission for that. So you can grant all that permission to specific users that you trust that will make sensible views. So you can, in a way, limit that use of this feature. And of course, we need to remember, this is mentioned here in this remark, that once you touch the query, the original view that came from the server, the filter and sorting tabs become disabled because you can no longer now do it in such fashion. You either edit the query or you utilize and fine-tune the results from these tabs. Another option, and here is where ALM and QC Enterprise Edition are different, is that both the Graph and Business to Use Excel add-in allows us to create cross-project reports that you can use not only just the current project, but you can ask to select additional projects. So he will get to see the list of domains and the projects here. So we can add additional projects to it, and we can also add that the result will include also the domain and project name, so we can slice the information according to the domain and project name. So we can create cross-project reports. And again, this option is available only to ALM edition. Once we are done with the reports and all the definitions, we can now save it and share it. And that can be done in two ways. We can save it as a regular Excel file stored locally on your machine, and then either email it to the report stakeholders or put it on collaboration platforms such as, and sharing platforms such as SharePoint, for example. So you could place it there, Dropbox, wherever you have the means to share data. And every stakeholder that opens it up will see the latest, the last refreshed data of it. If they are permitted user and have connectivity to the ALM server, they can log in and refresh it. And if not, they will just see the latest refresh that was done for that report. Or we can take that report with all the sophistication that we added to it, and we can ask in a way to save that report into the ALM, back to the ALM project. So I can ask to add it as a private or as a public report, my new report, and ask to save it. So now if I will go back to ALM, it should be available there as well. Okay, so and refresh. Okay, so we see my new report being available here as well. So again, the possibilities are quite big, and we can take it to any level of sophistication when it comes to reporting. So going back to the presentation, so just to recap on the again of the capabilities and the advantages of utilization of business use. So again, we can utilize it by graph, by having the option of business use graphs, and we can consume business use that are tailored to our exact needs, and we just need to pick up the business use and the graph is ready without much hassle around that. We can utilize cross-entity data to show entities with all their relationships, to see the defects that are linked to tests, or maybe to see defects that are not linked to any test, and maybe those that what we call the escape defects and so on. And we can easily utilize also in graphs calculated field to be part of that data visualization. When it comes to the business use Excel add-in, again, what we saw is actually it's a live data insertion into Excel, which is highly flexible, of course, based on business use. And the main point here is that you need to be just an Excel user. You don't need to be familiar even with ALM. It makes the reporting and the data in ALM available to much more users. You don't need to open up the ALM client. You do, however, need to have it installed, because it does consume the data using the API that is provided by the client. So for now, you still need to have it installed, but you don't need to open it up. You just need to open up Excel, and once you have the add-in installed, you can go to log in directly from Excel into the entire work, from getting the data to creating your sophisticated charts and tables and slices in Excel way only. And as we saw, it's easily shared. You can place it as a file that for every permitted user, it can be refreshed automatically and put it everywhere you find it suitable for you to share that report. So we can conclude actually with the wisdom factor, the what's in it for me. So I believe it's quite clear from administrator perspective, once you work wisely and you delegate the ability to create business use to project managers or other managers in the organization, by that, in a way, you get some peace of mind by having others join the effort of facilitating the needs of reporting. We get from many enhancement requests from the report means that we have today, that many of them were solved easily by our response that, hey, this can be easily done now using business use, as the freedom is much greater when it comes to business use. So many of the complex challenges that we see today reporting are easily solved using business use. In a way, you get to have eventually reduced calls for all reporting-related support requests. From the end user perspective, again, it's simply reporting now made much easier than before, especially when it comes to Excel reports. As I mentioned, you need to have Excel knowledge more than ALM knowledge, or SQL knowledge, or VBScript knowledge, so it makes the reporting design much easier for many other users. They become less dependent on administrators, again, by having maybe project managers to facilitate the views that they need. And again, Excel know-how is enough to create really sophisticated reports for the entire organization. So these are, in a way, the within factors of business use and their graphs that are based on them, and Excel add-in reports. So I believe this is time for questions. So if you have any question, I will be very happy to answer. We have right answers.
So there are 3 questions that I've assigned to you. So if you take a look at the question area.
Yeah, I can see that. Thank you, Bill. So I'll read them out loud. Yeah, and I'll see if I can answer. So what about being able to pass parameters to business use? For example, a business view that gives you all requirements tracing to one particular other requirement. This one requirement you want the user to be able to set. Today, such a business view has to be created by the admin for every single requirement. Please compare with Excel reports in which you could pass parameter. So indeed, this is, so Marcus, you are right in your question. The Excel reports that we had prior to business use had the support of parameters that you can create a general report, and then before it is executed, the user needs to type in a parameter to complete that execution. For example, I know the department ID, and then it will run for that department ID information. So that option is not yet available in business use. Again, we've introduced it not long ago, and this is part of the things that we have on our list to continue and support. However, the fact that now, in a way, the parameters, we can say, was really needed in the old style of Excel reports, because to define those additional filter criteria required the user to go into the select statement, and that is something that we can request a user to do. So in a way, the problem is much smaller today with the business use, even though we don't support parameters yet, and we do plan to do that, is the fact that now a common user does not need to have a know-how of select statement. If you create a view where we place a field that the user can filter by quite easily, so now the user interface to go and do that filtering is quite easy. So it is even much like to do it in ALM. So you go, so if now I need to have the report to be tailored to particular severity, now it is quite easy. Again, it doesn't replace the need that I can pinpoint the user directly to the required parameter, but still now the effort to do that is much smaller and much easier than it was before with the Excel report. So to the second question, what I'm asking is not about editing the query in Excel, because that only narrows down on data that is already narrowed down by the original business view. Yeah, you're right, but it still provides means to do that filtering very close to the parameters, and yes, the parameters will hopefully be supported later on. This is part of the business use planned additional deliveries. Okay, so I see actually that the third also it's in a way it's one question that is being, if I'm not mistaken, being elaborated in all other entries. So, Bill, do we have other questions, or these are just the questions that came in?
These are the questions that came in, Marcus.
Okay. Okay, so I do hope that everything was clear. This is more or less wraps all the things that I wanted to demonstrate and to tell you about business use, about their availability, where they can be defined and how they are defined, and how they are eventually consumed again by charts and Excel add-in. A few words on that? On the community, you want to say a few words on that?
Yeah, sure. I'll say that, Marcus. So, I'm sorry, Ofer. Thank you for your presentation today. For the people on the phone, that if you want to submit questions after this session, you can go into our forms, right? And you would go into the link above, and maybe you've been there already. But when you go into the Quality Center ALM area, you'll see the Quality Center Support Customer Form. This is the form that's only available for customers and partners with a valid support ID, an SAID. If you can't get into that form, please send an email to swcommunity@hp.com, right? So then we could take a look at, see what's going on. But if you have a valid support contract in your HP Passport profile, you should be able to access this form. I will be posting something in the next hour or hour and a half regarding this session. So you could submit your questions there. There'll also be a link to the recording that you can also review that afterwards if you want to. And during the week, you could submit questions regarding this, but also you can go into the form where we have support engineers in there all week where you can submit any questions regarding ALM or QC. So that's all we have for today. We'll be doing 2 other sessions this afternoon. I want to thank Ofer for your time today, and also to everyone on the phone for attending, and hope we'll see you later on today in the other 2 sessions. And if you can't make it, the recordings will be there, and you could listen to them by random. And don't forget to go into the forums and asking your questions. Thanks for everyone's time today, and have a nice day.